My marriage was like a good bourbon. Looked fine in the bottle, but on the rocks, it just got bitter. I should have seen the signs earlier, but hindsight has 20/20 vision while you're stumbling around in the dark with a blindfold made of trust and 15 years of shared mortgage payments. My name is Fletcher Grant, and I'm 45 years old with the kind of face that screams middle management and a receding hairline that whispers disappointed expectations. I work as a finance manager for a mid-sized consulting firm, which means I travel 3 weeks out of every month, crunching numbers for clients who think spreadsheets are some kind of dark magic. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could balance anyone's books except my own life. Mira, my wife of 17 years, worked as a creative lead at Hartwell & Associates, one of those advertising agencies where everyone wore black turtlenecks and talked about synergy like it was a religious experience. She was 42, still beautiful in that sharp-edged way that made waiters stumble over themselves, and made me wonder what she ever saw in a guy who got excited about quarterly reports. The first crack in our perfect suburban facade appeared on a Tuesday in March. I'd just returned from a week-long audit in Cleveland, a city that makes watching paint dry seem like extreme sports, and found Caldwell Morley's toolbox sitting in our bedroom closet like it owned the place. Cal fixed the squeaky hinge on the closet door, Mira explained, not looking up from her laptop where she was probably designing an ad campaign for artisanal dog treats or organic shoelaces. You know how it's been driving me crazy. I knew Caldwell, Cal to his friends, which apparently included my wife. He lived 4 houses down with his wife Jenny, a no-nonsense nurse who worked the night shift at Mercy General. Cal was 49, built like a linebacker gone slightly soft, with the kind of easy charm that made neighbors trust him with their spare keys and apparently their spouse's bedroom repairs. Couldn't it wait until I got back? I asked, moving the toolbox to make room for my suitcase. Mira finally looked up, and for just a second, I caught something in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance at being questioned. Fletcher, it was just a hinge. Cal was here working on the kitchen faucet anyway. It made sense to handle both things at once. The kitchen faucet. Right. I walked downstairs and turned it on. Worked perfectly, just like it had for the past 6 months since I'd replaced the cartridge myself, but I didn't say anything. Marriage teaches you to pick your battles, and apparently, I'd been losing the war while I was busy choosing the wrong hills to defend. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Little things that individually meant nothing, but together painted a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. Mira's laughter coming from the kitchen when I called during my trips, followed by a quick, "Oh, that's just the TV." The way she developed sudden enthusiasm for home improvement projects that always seemed to require Cal's expertise. The fact that our bedroom always smelled faintly of his cologne, something woody and expensive that definitely wasn't in my medicine cabinet. My best friend Darius Klein, Dare to everyone who knew him, tended bar at Murphy's Pub downtown. He had the kind of wisdom that only comes from listening to people's problems while polishing glasses, and the cynicism that comes from watching those same people make the same mistakes every night. "You're being paranoid," he told me one Thursday evening, as I nursed my second whiskey and outlined my suspicions. "Mira's not the cheating type. She's too smart for that." "Smart people cheat all the time," I replied. "They're just better at hiding it." Dare wiped down the bar with the methodical precision of a man who'd been doing it for 20 years. "Fletcher, you travel constantly. Your wife's lonely. Cal's helping around the house. It's called being neighborly, not adultery." But I'd started keeping a mental ledger, tracking the coincidences that were becoming too frequent to ignore. Every time I left town, something in our house mysteriously needed repair. Our garbage disposal, the bathroom fan, the deck railing, all jobs that somehow required multiple visits and Cal's special expertise. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in April. I'd been in Detroit for 3 days, reviewing the books for a manufacturing company that made widgets for widgets, when I decided to surprise Mira by coming home a day early. I called her from the airport. "Fletcher? What's wrong?" Her voice sounded breathless, like she'd been running. "Nothing's wrong. I finished early and caught an earlier flight. I'll be home in an hour." There was a pause. Then, "Oh, okay, I'm in the middle of something. With Cal. He's fixing the—" Let me guess. Something else broke while I was gone. Another pause. Longer this time. The garage door opener. It's been making that grinding noise. I'd installed that garage door opener myself 2 years ago. It was commercial grade, designed to last 20 years without so much as a hiccup. But I just said, "Okay, see you soon." When I pulled into our driveway 53 minutes later, Cal's pickup truck was parked in front of our house like it belonged there. I sat in my rental car for a moment, engine running, windshield wipers fighting the rain, and tried to decide what I was really afraid of finding. The garage door opened perfectly. No grinding, no noise at all except the smooth hum of a motor that was working exactly as designed. I found them in the kitchen. Mira was leaning against the counter, her hair slightly mussed, wearing a silk blouse that I'd bought her for Christmas but had never seen her wear. Cal was putting tools back in his box, the same toolbox that seemed to have permanent residency in our house. "Fletcher!" Mira's smile was too bright, like a fluorescent bulb about to burn out. "You're early." Traffic was lighter than expected. I looked at Cal, who was avoiding eye contact with the intensity of a man trying not to stare at the sun. "How's the garage door?" "Good as new," he said, still not looking at me. "Just needed some lubrication." I'll bet it did. "What do I owe you?" I asked. Cal waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. That's what neighbors are for." After he left, Mira and I sat down to dinner. Take-out Chinese that she'd obviously ordered in a hurry. We made small talk about my trip, her work, the weather, all the conversational debris that married couples use to fill the silence when they don't want to talk about what's really happening. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and listened to Mira's breathing. She fell asleep quickly, the way people do when they're not wrestling with uncomfortable questions, but I stayed awake, adding up the numbers in my head like I was working on someone else's audit. The frequency of repairs. The timing that always coincided with my travel. The way Mira had started dressing better on days when I was out of town. Something I'd noticed from the laundry. The good clothes that somehow got dirty while I was gone. The phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. I was building a case against my own wife, and the evidence was mounting like compound interest. The next morning, Mira left for work early, claiming she had a breakfast meeting with a client. I called in late to my own job and spent the morning walking through our house like a detective at a crime scene. In the bedroom, I found a small hole in the bookshelf that hadn't been there before, perfectly round, about the size of a pencil eraser, drilled into the spine of a book I'd never seen Mira read. In the kitchen, I discovered that the faucet Cal had supposedly repaired showed no signs of recent work, no scratches on the fittings, no fresh plumber's putty, nothing to indicate it had been touched by tools. But it was the coffee cups that really got to me. 2 cups in the dishwasher, both with lipstick stains. Mira's usual shade on one cup, but the other was a different color, deeper, more burgundy, the kind of shade that Jenny Morley wore. I stood there holding that second cup, turning it over in my hands, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly. More like the moment when you're doing a puzzle and suddenly see how all the pieces fit together. The picture wasn't pretty, but at least it made sense. That evening, I was grading papers at the kitchen table. I taught a night class in business accounting at the community college because apparently I was a glutton for punishment, when someone knocked on our front door. Mira was upstairs in the shower, so I answered it myself. Jenny Morley stood on my porch, looking like she'd been through a blender. Her usually perfect nurse's uniform was wrinkled, her hair was coming loose from its ponytail, and her face had the kind of pallor that comes from not sleeping for several days. "Fletcher," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk. Now." I looked over her shoulder at the street. Cal's pickup truck wasn't in their driveway. "Where's Cal?" "Working late. Or at least, that's what he told me." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clutching a small purse against her chest like armor. "Can I come in?" I glanced up the stairs. The shower was still running. "Maybe we should talk outside." Jenny shook her head. "What I have to show you, it's better if we're somewhere private." Something in her tone made my decision for me. I stepped back and let her in, closing the door behind her. We went into my home office, a small room off the living room that Mira never entered because it was filled with the kind of boring financial documents that made her eyes glaze over. Jenny sat down across from my desk and opened her purse. She pulled out a small device that looked like a USB drive, except it had a tiny lens on one end. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's a motion-activated camera, records in high definition, stores everything on internal memory." She held it up to the light, and I could see how small it really was. No bigger than a thumb drive. "I bought it online 3 weeks ago. Cost me $200. Why are you showing me this?" Jenny's laugh was bitter, the sound of someone who'd run out of tears and moved on to darker emotions. "Because I installed it in your bedroom bookshelf on March 15th, right after I started suspecting that my husband was spending his lunch break somewhere other than the hardware store." The shower upstairs turned off. We both looked at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Mira moving around in the bathroom. "You've been recording in my bedroom?" I kept my voice low, but I could hear the edge creeping in. "I've been recording my husband's extracurricular activities. The fact that they're taking place in your bedroom is just geography." Jenny plugged the device into my computer. "Fletcher, I know this is going to hurt, but you deserve to know what's been happening while you're out of town." The computer recognized the device immediately. A folder popped up showing dozens of video files, all dated and time-stamped. Jenny clicked on one from the previous week, a day when I'd been in Milwaukee, reviewing the books for a cheese distributor. "You don't have to watch," she said. "I can just tell you what's on here." But I was already watching. The camera had been positioned perfectly to capture our entire bedroom. The angle was slightly elevated, like it was looking down from the bookshelf, which made sense because that's exactly where it had been hidden. At first, the room was empty. Then the bedroom door opened, and Mira walked in, followed by Cal. They were both fully clothed, talking and laughing about something I couldn't hear. The camera recorded video but no audio. What happened next wasn't graphic, but it was unmistakable. The way they moved around each other, the casual intimacy, the fact that Cal seemed to know exactly where everything was in my bedroom. This wasn't a first-time encounter. This was routine. I closed the video player. "How long?" I asked. "Based on the timestamps? At least 2 months, maybe longer." Jenny ejected the device and put it back in her purse. "Fletcher, I'm sorry. I know this isn't how you wanted to find out." Upstairs, I could hear Mira blow-drying her hair. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal marriage that had apparently been a lie for months. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Jenny stood up, smoothing down her uniform. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man my husband really is, and what kind of woman your wife is." She paused at the office door. "The question is, what are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer yet, but as I listened to her let herself out the front door, I realized that I was no longer just keeping a mental ledger of suspicious incidents. I was about to start balancing the books. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes from finally admitting something you've been avoiding. Mira was already gone. Another early meeting, she'd said, kissing my cheek with lips that had been lying to me for months. The kiss felt different now, like a counterfeit bill that you can't quite identify as fake until someone points out the flaws. I called in another late day and spent the morning researching. Not financial statements this time, but divorce lawyers and private investigators. The internet was full of advice for betrayed spouses, most of it either too expensive or too illegal for my taste. But one forum post caught my attention. The best revenge is letting them destroy themselves in public. That afternoon, Jenny called me at work. "Can you meet me for coffee?" she asked. "There's more we need to discuss." We met at a small cafe downtown, far enough from our neighborhood that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. Jenny looked better than she had the night before. She'd slept, showered, and put on makeup that almost hid the exhaustion in her eyes. "I've been thinking about what you asked me," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision. "About what I'm going to do. And I want them to suffer the way we've been suffering. But I want it to be public. I want everyone to see what they really are." She looked up from her coffee cup. "I have an idea, but I need your help." Jenny's plan was elegant in its simplicity. In 2 weeks, Mira and I were scheduled to host our annual spring dinner party, a neighborhood tradition that had started 5 years ago and had grown into the social event of our little suburban enclave. 12 couples, good food, plenty of wine, and the kind of gossip that kept the neighborhood app buzzing for weeks. "Everyone will be there," Jenny said, "including Cal and me, including all the neighbors who've been watching your wife parade around like the perfect suburban hostess while she's been entertaining my husband in your bedroom." The plan required timing, technology, and a complete willingness to detonate our lives in front of an audience. Jenny would provide the evidence. She'd been collecting video files for weeks, building a comprehensive record of the affair. I would provide the venue and the means of distribution. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Both our marriages will be over." Jenny's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Fletcher, my marriage ended the day my husband decided your wife was more interesting than his own. I'm just making it official." Over the next 2 weeks, we planned with the precision of a military operation. Jenny copied all the video files onto a thumb drive, editing them into a presentation that was damning but not pornographic. We wanted to humiliate them, not create a scandal that would get us arrested. I tested the connection between my laptop and our living room television, making sure I could switch from our planned slideshow to Jenny's evidence without any technical difficulties. The hardest part was acting normal around Mira. She'd become increasingly affectionate as the dinner party approached, the way guilty people often do when they're trying to overcompensate. She bought a new dress for the occasion, something elegant and expensive that she charged to our joint credit card. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was paying for her to look beautiful while she destroyed our marriage. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening as we planned the menu. "Everything okay?" "Just work stress," I lied, making notes about appetizers while mentally rehearsing my presentation. "You know how it is." She rubbed my shoulders, her hands warm through my shirt. "Well, try to relax this weekend. I want our party to be perfect." Perfect. Right. The day of the dinner party, I took the afternoon off to help with preparations. Mira was in her element, arranging flowers and adjusting place settings, with the focus of a general planning a campaign. She'd always been good at entertaining. It was one of the things that had attracted me to her when we first met. She could make anyone feel welcome, turn a simple dinner into an event that people talked about for months. Tonight would definitely be memorable. Our guests started arriving at 7, the Hendersons from next door bringing their famous potato salad and their usual complaints about the city's leaf collection schedule. The Patels from across the street, with wine that cost more than my monthly car payment and stories about their son's latest achievements in medical school. The Kowalskis, the Chens, the Johnsons, all the familiar faces of our suburban social circle, people who'd been to these parties for years and expected nothing more dramatic than gossip about property taxes and school board elections. Cal and Jenny arrived fashionably late, as they always did. Cal looked uncomfortable in his good shirt and tie, like a man dressed for his own funeral. Jenny was radiant in a way that made me think of Greek goddesses preparing for war, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Fletcher," Cal clapped me on the shoulder with forced enthusiasm. "Great party as always. Mira outdid herself with the decorations." "She certainly did," I replied, accepting a bottle of wine that I knew I'd never drink. "Make yourselves at home. You know where everything is." The double meaning wasn't lost on Jenny, who covered her laugh with a cough. Dinner went smoothly. Mira had prepared her signature beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables, and our guests praised everything from the seasoning to the presentation. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine: neighborhood news, vacation plans, complaints about the construction on Maple Street that had been going on for 6 months. I played the perfect host, refilling glasses and steering conversations, all while watching the clock. Jenny and I had agreed to wait until after the main course, when everyone was relaxed and the wine had loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. "Fletcher," called out Mrs. Patterson from down the street, "didn't you just get back from another business trip? Where was it this time?" "Phoenix," I said, clearing plates with practiced efficiency. "Fascinating place. All that desert and sunshine. Makes you appreciate what you have at home." Mira smiled at me from across the table, the kind of warm, loving expression that would have melted my heart 2 months ago. Now it just reminded me of everything I was about to lose. "Speaking of home," I continued, "I put together a little slideshow of some recent photos. Nothing fancy, just some memories I thought you might enjoy while we're having dessert." I'd connected my laptop to the television earlier, testing the setup while Mira was busy in the kitchen. The screen showed our screensaver, a peaceful mountain lake that had nothing to do with anything but looked appropriately domestic. "Oh, Fletcher," Mira laughed. "You and your presentations, you can't help yourself, can you?" "It's the accountant in me," I said, pulling up the slideshow program. "Everything has to be organized and documented." Our guests settled back in their chairs, wine glasses refilled, expecting to see vacation photos or pictures from last year's neighborhood block party. I started with exactly that. Safe, boring images that would lull them into complacency. Mira at the beach last summer, our Christmas tree, the new landscaping in our backyard. "These are lovely," said Mrs. Chen. "You two always look so happy together." "We have our moments," I replied, clicking to the next slide. Jenny caught my eye from across the table and nodded slightly. It was time. "This next set of photos is a bit different," I said, my finger hovering over the mouse. "It's more of a documentary, really, about what happens in our house when some people think no one is watching." I clicked. The screen filled with an image from Jenny's hidden camera. High definition, perfectly lit, unmistakably our bedroom. Mira and Cal were clearly visible, and what they were doing left no room for interpretation or innocent explanations. The silence that followed was absolute. 12 neighbors sat frozen, wine glasses halfway to their lips, staring at evidence of an affair that had been conducted right under their noses for months. Mira's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against her plate, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like an accusation. She lunged for the laptop, but I was ready for that. I'd moved it out of reach, and the presentation was already cued to continue automatically. "Fletcher, stop this right now." Mira's voice cracked with panic and rage. "This is insane." "Is it?" I asked, my voice calm and conversational, like I was discussing quarterly earnings. "Because it looks pretty sane to me. Documented, time-stamped, high-definition sanity." Cal had gone pale, his face the color of old newspaper. He started to stand, but Jenny's hand on his arm stopped him. "Sit down, dear," she said sweetly. "You wouldn't want to miss your performance." The next image appeared on screen, dated from the previous week. Then another from the week before that. A chronological record of betrayal, each photo more damning than the last. "My God," whispered Mrs. Patterson. "Is that your bedroom, Mira?" Mira couldn't answer. She was staring at the screen in horror, watching her secret life displayed for everyone to see. Cal looked like he was about to be sick. "I recognize that throw pillow," said Mrs. Henderson, her voice filled with the kind of fascination that comes from witnessing a spectacular disaster. "I helped you pick it out at Target last month." The presentation continued for 3 more slides before I closed the laptop. The silence stretched out like a held breath, broken only by the sound of Mira's chair scraping against the floor as she stood up. "I can't. I won't," she stammered, then turned and ran toward the front door. Cal was right behind her, but he headed for the patio, probably hoping to escape through our backyard and avoid the neighbors who were already pulling out their phones. And just like that, it was over. 17 years of marriage ended not with lawyers or counseling or tearful conversations about growing apart, but with a PowerPoint presentation and a shattered wine glass. Our guests sat in stunned silence, looking back and forth between the blank television screen, Jenny's satisfied expression, and my own carefully neutral face. "Well," I said, standing up to clear the remaining dishes, "I guess dessert's off. Too bad. I made an incredible tiramisu." Jenny started laughing, not hysterically, but with genuine amusement. "Fletcher, you beautiful, vengeful man. That was perfect." Should we go?" asked Mr. Patterson, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden turn from dinner party to public execution. "That's probably best," I agreed. "Jenny and I have some cleaning up to do." As our guests filed out, I could hear them whispering among themselves, already crafting the story they'd tell their other friends and neighbors. By tomorrow morning, everyone in a 6-block radius would know what Mira and Cal had been doing. By tomorrow evening, it would be on the neighborhood social media app, with commentary from people who'd never even met us. Jenny stayed behind, helping me load the dishwasher and wrap up the untouched dessert. We worked in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd just burned their lives down and were surprisingly okay with watching them burn. "How do you feel?" she asked as we finished wiping down the counters. I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? Not angry, exactly. Not sad. More like relieved. Like I'd been carrying a heavy weight for months and had finally been able to set it down. "Free," I said finally. "Terrified, but free." Jenny nodded. "That's exactly right. Terrifying freedom." She hung up the dish towel and looked around our kitchen. My kitchen now, I supposed. "What happens next?" "I honestly don't know. Divorce lawyers, I guess. Dividing assets. Fighting over who gets the good china." I gestured toward the dining room, where the evidence of our destroyed dinner party was still scattered across the table. "What about you?" "Same thing. Though I think Cal's going to have a harder time explaining this to his church friends than I am to mine." Jenny's smile was sharp and satisfied. "Turns out revenge is best served cold, but it still leaves you hungry for something better." She was right. We'd gotten our revenge, exposed the cheaters, made sure everyone knew what they really were. But standing in my empty house, surrounded by the debris of a marriage that had been a lie for months, I realized that revenge was just the appetizer. The real meal was whatever came next. The aftermath of our dinner party played out like a slow-motion explosion across our neighborhood's social landscape. By Sunday morning, my phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, ranging from concerned friends to nosy acquaintances who wanted the full story. The neighborhood app was buzzing with barely disguised gossip, disguised as concern for everyone involved. Mira hadn't come home Saturday night. Her car was gone from the driveway, along with the suitcase she kept in our bedroom closet for business trips. She'd left behind her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, positioned precisely in the center like evidence in a crime scene. Cal, according to Jenny, had spent the night in his workshop, emerging Sunday morning to find that someone, probably Mrs. Henderson, who had the subtlety of a bullhorn, had shared the story with their church congregation. His phone was ringing constantly, but he wasn't answering. "Turns out public humiliation is more effective than couples therapy," Jenny observed as we sat on my back deck Sunday afternoon, drinking coffee and watching the neighbors pretend they weren't staring at my house. Much faster, too. I'd called in sick to work Monday morning, not because I was actually ill, but because I needed time to process what I'd done and figure out what came next. The house felt different without Mira's presence, not empty exactly, but like a theater after the audience has gone home. All the props were still in place, but the performance was over. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. Mira's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But curiosity won over self-preservation. Fletcher. Her voice was flat, exhausted. We need to talk. I figured we'd covered everything pretty thoroughly Saturday night. High definition, even. Don't be clever. Not now. I could hear traffic in the background, like she was calling from a parking lot or street corner. I'm coming to get some of my things. I'd prefer if you weren't there. It's my house too, Mira. Actually, it's more my house than yours, considering I'm the one who's been paying the mortgage while you were busy with your home improvement projects. Silence. Then, I'll be there at noon. She hung up before I could respond. I was waiting in the living room when she arrived, positioned in the same chair where I'd watched our marriage explode in front of 12 witnesses. Mira looked like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days. Her usually perfect makeup was minimal. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual carefully coordinated outfits. "You destroyed us," she said without preamble, standing in the doorway like she was afraid to come any closer. "You destroyed everything." "I documented what was already destroyed. There's a difference." Mira walked to the mantelpiece where we kept family photos from happier times, or times that had seemed happier before I knew what was really happening. She picked up a picture from our anniversary dinner last year, studying it like she was trying to remember who those people were. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About you and Cal? 6 weeks? About you lying to me?" Apparently, a lot longer than I realized. She set the photo down and turned to face me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to tell me eventually, or just keep sneaking around until I caught you in person? "I don't know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I was thinking." "You were thinking that I'd never find out because I'm just boring old Fletcher who travels for work and doesn't pay attention to what's happening in his own house." I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. "You were thinking that I was too stupid or too trusting to notice that my wife was having an affair with our neighbor." Mira flinched like I'd slapped her. It didn't start as an affair. Cal was just helping around the house, and we became friends, and then you became really good friends. I saw the footage, Mira. That wasn't friendship." She closed her eyes, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Everyone knows," she said. "Everyone in the neighborhood, everyone at work. My boss called this morning. Apparently, someone sent the photos to the office email list. I hadn't done that, but I had a pretty good idea who had. Jenny worked at the hospital, but she had friends everywhere, and the kind of righteous anger that motivated people to share information widely. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know," Mira continued. "In front of our friends, our neighbors. How am I supposed to show my face anywhere?" The same way I was supposed to show my face after months of being the clueless husband whose wife was cheating with the handyman. At least your humiliation is honest. Mira opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to realize she didn't have a leg to stand on. She walked upstairs to pack, and I listened to her moving around our former bedroom, gathering clothes and personal items. When she came back down with 2 suitcases, she looked like a stranger. "I'll have a lawyer contact you," she said. "About the divorce." "Already handled. I called Morrison and Associates this morning. They're expecting to hear from your representation." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I'm good with details. It's what I do for a living." After she left, I called Jenny. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Better than expected. Cal moved out this morning. He's staying with his brother in Millfield, at least temporarily. There was satisfaction in her voice, but also something that sounded like relief. I filed for divorce this afternoon. That was fast. Fletcher, I've been planning this conversation for 6 weeks. I just needed the right moment to have it. Jenny paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. What about you? How did it go with Mira? About as well as you'd expect. She's angry, humiliated, and trying to make this my fault for exposing them instead of her fault for cheating. Typical. They never want to take responsibility for their own choices. Over the next few days, the story spread beyond our immediate neighborhood. Someone had posted photos from the dinner party on social media, not the explicit images, but pictures of our guests' shocked faces and Mira's dramatic exit. The local gossip network picked it up, and suddenly I was getting calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to hear the details firsthand. My boss, thankfully, was understanding. Take all the time you need, he told me when I explained the situation. Divorce is never easy, but public divorce is its own special nightmare. The worst part wasn't the attention or the gossip or even the legal complications that were starting to pile up. The worst part was the quiet moments when I realized that my life as I'd known it was completely over. 17 years of marriage, gone. The comfortable routines, the shared history, the assumption that we were building something together, all of it had been built on lies, and now I was standing in the wreckage trying to figure out what to salvage. But there were unexpected benefits too. Neighbors who had always been polite but distant suddenly wanted to invite me to barbecues and block parties. My friend Dare started dropping by regularly, bringing beer and moral support. Even my kids, who lived across the country and rarely called, started checking in more frequently. Dad, are you okay? My daughter Amelia asked during one of our newly regular phone conversations. I mean, I know you're not okay, but are you going to be okay? I think so, I told her, and was surprised to realize I meant it. It's going to take some time, but I think I'm going to be better than okay. Good. Because honestly, I never really liked Mira anyway. She always seemed fake to me. Kids, they see things adults miss. 2 weeks after the dinner party, Jenny knocked on my door again. This time she looked like her old self, rested, confident, wearing scrubs because she was heading to work. I wanted to thank you, she said, for having the courage to do what we did. I know it wasn't easy. It was easier than I expected. Turns out I'm pretty good at revenge when I put my mind to it. Jenny laughed. You're good at a lot of things. Mira was an idiot to throw you away for someone like Cal. Cal's not a bad guy, he's just weak. And apparently he has terrible judgment in women. Present company excluded, I hope. I looked at Jenny, really looked at her, for the first time since this whole mess started. She was attractive in a way that Mira had never been, more natural and less calculated. But more than that, she was honest. She'd been betrayed the same way I had, and instead of falling apart or making excuses, she'd done something about it. Present company definitely excluded, I said. As she walked back to her car, I realized that revenge might be a dish best served cold, but sometimes it comes with unexpected side benefits. I'd lost a wife who'd been lying to me for months, but I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I didn't have to accept being treated badly just to keep the peace. The underdog had finally learned to bite back, and it felt pretty good. The legal machinery of divorce, I discovered, moves with all the speed and efficiency of a government bureaucracy during a blizzard. 3 weeks after the dinner party that ended my marriage, I was sitting in the office of Patricia Morrison, divorce attorney extraordinaire, reviewing documents that would divide 17 years of shared life into itemized assets and liabilities. Your wife's lawyer is pushing for spousal support, Morrison told me, sliding a folder across her mahogany desk. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made opposing counsel nervous. Claiming she needs time to rebuild her career after the... public nature of your separation. Her career? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She's the one who chose to have an affair. She's the one who destroyed her own reputation. Nevertheless, she's arguing that your actions were vindictive and designed to damage her professionally. Morrison opened the folder and pulled out several printed emails. She's also claiming emotional distress. I read through the legal documents, each page a masterpiece of creative fiction. According to Mira's version of events, I was a controlling husband who had secretly recorded her without consent and then used the footage to publicly humiliate her. She conveniently left out the part where she'd been cheating with our neighbor for months. What about the evidence? The video footage proves she was having an affair. The footage was obtained without her knowledge or consent. Her lawyer is arguing it's inadmissible and potentially illegal. Morrison leaned back in her chair. Fletcher, I need you to understand something. In divorce court, the truth and legal reality don't always align perfectly. Over the next week, Mira's campaign of revisionist history expanded beyond the legal system. Someone, probably her friend Lila from the ad agency, started a whisper campaign on social media, painting me as an abusive husband who had psychologically tormented my wife and violated her privacy. The narrative was carefully crafted. Poor Mira, trapped in a marriage with a controlling man who traveled constantly and then punished her for seeking companionship. It was brilliant in a sociopathic way, and it was working. People are starting to talk, Dare told me one evening as we sat at Murphy's pub. The usual crowd was there, but I noticed the conversations got quieter when I walked in, and a few people who used to say hello now just nodded politely and looked away. Let them talk. Anyone who knows me knows the truth. The problem is, most people don't really know you. They know Mira. She's charming, outgoing, the kind of person who makes an impression. You're... Dare paused diplomatically. Boring, forgettable, the kind of guy who blends into the background. I was going to say private, but sure, let's go with that. He was right, of course. Mira had always been the social face of our marriage. She organized the dinner parties, maintained the friendships, crafted our public image. I was just the guy who paid for everything and showed up when required. Now she was using those same social skills to rewrite history, and I was discovering that public opinion was surprisingly easy to manipulate when you had the right story and the right delivery. But Mira had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated Jenny. We need to fight back, Jenny told me during one of our increasingly frequent coffee meetings. We'd started meeting regularly, partly to coordinate our legal strategies, but mostly because we were the only two people who understood what we were going through. How? She's better at this than I am. Always has been. She's better at manipulation, but we have something she doesn't. Which is? Jenny smiled, and I was reminded of why Cal had been such an idiot to cheat on her. Documentation, evidence, and the willingness to use both. Jenny's plan was more sophisticated than our dinner party ambush. She'd been busy since our public revelation, using her network of friends and contacts to gather information about both Mira and Cal. Hospital workers, she explained, were natural gossips, and they had connections everywhere. Did you know that Cal's been having financial problems? She asked, pulling out a folder that rivaled my lawyer's collection. His handyman business is barely breaking even. He's behind on his truck payments, his insurance lapsed last month, and he owes money to 3 different suppliers. How do you know all this? My friend Sarah works at the credit union where he banks. She's not supposed to share information, but she's also been through a messy divorce, and she has strong opinions about cheating husbands. Jenny had also discovered that Mira's claims of professional damage were somewhat exaggerated. Her ad agency was struggling financially, and there had been talk of layoffs even before our dinner party scandal. Several clients had complained about her work, and her boss had been looking for a reason to let her go. She's not the victim she's pretending to be, Jenny concluded. She's just someone who got caught and is trying to blame everyone else for the consequences. Armed with this information, I started my own campaign of strategic information sharing. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be traced back to me, but a steady stream of facts that painted a different picture than Mira's victim narrative. I started with her co-workers, a carefully worded email to her boss, expressing concern about Mira's claims that the agency was suffering because of my actions, along with documentation showing that her performance issues predated our marital problems. I didn't have to lie or exaggerate. I just had to make sure the timeline was clear. Next, I addressed the financial claims. Mira was arguing that she deserved spousal support because I'd damaged her earning potential. But bank records showed that she'd been spending money recklessly for months. Expensive clothes, jewelry, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Money that had come from our joint accounts while she was having an affair. She was funding her affair with our savings, I told Morrison during our next meeting. Buying clothes to impress her lover, paying for hotel rooms when my house wasn't convenient enough. Can you prove that? I handed her a stack of credit card statements and bank records. Every transaction, categorized and cross-referenced. It turns out keeping detailed financial records is useful for more than just tax preparation. The most satisfying part of my counter-campaign was exposing Cal's role in the whole mess. Jenny and I worked together to document his pattern of targeting lonely housewives in the neighborhood. We found 3 other women he'd helped with home repairs while their husbands were at work. Nothing as serious as a full affair, but enough inappropriate behavior to establish a pattern. He's not just a cheater, Jenny observed as we compiled our evidence. He's a predator. He specifically targets married women whose husbands travel for work. We shared this information strategically, a word here, a document there, always through intermediaries who couldn't be traced back to us. Within 2 weeks, Cal's reputation in the neighborhood had shifted from helpful handyman to creepy guy who hits on married women. His business, already struggling, collapsed entirely. Word spread through the community that Cal Morley wasn't trustworthy around wives and daughters. Jobs dried up, referrals stopped coming, and his truck was repossessed when he couldn't make the payments. The psychological pressure was working on both of them. Mira's carefully constructed victim narrative started falling apart as more information came to light. Her lawyer had to spend time defending against evidence of her affair instead of focusing on her financial claims. Cal, meanwhile, was dealing with the complete destruction of his professional and social life. But they weren't giving up without a fight. "Your wife is escalating," Morrison warned me during a phone call. "She's threatening to claim domestic abuse, emotional and psychological abuse, specifically." "That's ridiculous. I never laid a hand on her." "She's not claiming physical abuse. She's saying you created a hostile environment, that you were controlling and manipulative, that the dinner party incident was the culmination of years of psychological warfare." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Abuse allegations, even false ones, could destroy my career and my reputation in ways that would take years to repair. "Can she do that? Just make accusations without proof?" "She can try. The question is whether anyone will believe her." Morrison's voice was grim. "Fletcher, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything in your marriage that could be interpreted as controlling or manipulative behavior?" I thought about it carefully. Had I been controlling? I'd managed our finances, but that was because I was better with money. I'd made decisions about home repairs and major purchases, but Mira had never objected. I'd been the one to suggest we host dinner parties and maintain relationships with neighbors, but that had seemed like normal husband behavior at the time. "I don't think so," I said finally. But then again, I didn't think my wife was having an affair either. Apparently, I'm not the best judge of what's really happening in my own marriage. That evening, I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out how my life had become a chess game where every move had the potential to destroy me. I'd wanted justice, maybe even revenge, but I hadn't anticipated that the people I was fighting would be willing to lie so completely about who we all were. My phone rang. Jenny's name appeared on the screen. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Cal's talking about filing charges against you." "For what?" "Harassment. Stalking. He's claiming that you've been systematically destroying his life and that he fears for his safety." I laughed, but it sounded bitter even to me. He fears for his safety? He's the one who's been sneaking around my house for months. I know that, and you know that, but he's got a lawyer now too. And apparently his lawyer thinks they can flip the script, make you and me look like the aggressors. I hung up the phone and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 8 years. Houses full of people who used to wave when they saw me, who used to invite me to barbecues and block parties. Now they whispered when I walked by, uncertain whether I was a wronged husband seeking justice or a dangerous man who'd crossed the line into stalking and harassment. The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure myself anymore, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Mira and Cal rewrite history to make themselves the victims. If they wanted to escalate this fight, I was ready to show them just how thorough an accountant could be when he really put his mind to it. The ledger was open, and I was just getting started with the calculations. The harassment charges never materialized, but the threat hung over everything like smoke from a distant fire. Cal's lawyer, it turned out, was his cousin Eddie, a personal injury attorney who specialized in slip-and-fall cases and had about as much experience with harassment law as I had with brain surgery. But the threat served its purpose. It made me careful, paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. "They're trying to make you afraid," Jenny observed during one of our coffee meetings. We'd started meeting at different places around town, partly because we were both getting tired of the curious stares from neighbors, but mostly because I was genuinely worried about being accused of stalking her too. "It's working," I admitted. "I find myself documenting everything I do, everywhere I go, just in case I need an alibi for some imaginary crime." "Good. Document everything, but don't let them make you stop living your life." Easy for her to say. Jenny was a nurse with a solid reputation and a network of professional contacts who knew her character. I was a traveling accountant whose wife had convinced half the neighborhood that I was a controlling, potentially dangerous husband. The social mathematics were not in my favor. But mathematics, as it happened, were exactly what I needed. I spent the next week doing what I did best, building spreadsheets. Not financial projections this time, but detailed timelines of everything that had happened over the past 6 months. Every business trip, cross-referenced with credit card statements showing where I'd actually been. Every home repair Cal had performed, with dates and times and photographic evidence of the work, or lack thereof. Every social media post, every phone call, every interaction that could be verified and documented. What emerged was a pattern that was even more damning than I'd realized. Cal hadn't just been having an affair with my wife, he'd been systematically targeting our household while I was away, using his access to steal small items that I might not notice immediately. Tools from my workshop, cash from the emergency fund Mira kept in the kitchen drawer. Even groceries, apparently, since our food bills had been mysteriously high for months. "He's not just a cheater," I told Morrison during our next meeting. "He's a thief." "Can you prove it?" I handed her a folder containing bank statements, receipts, and inventory lists. Every missing item, documented and photographed. Total value, approximately $3,000 over 6 months. Morrison whistled softly. "That's felony territory." "It gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective." I pulled out another set of documents. I had a security system installed last month, cameras covering all the entrances to my house. Cal didn't know about them. The footage from my new security cameras was revealing in ways I hadn't expected. Cal had continued coming to my house even after the dinner party incident, using the spare key that Mira had apparently given him months ago. He wasn't meeting her. She'd moved out by then, but he was still entering my property, going through my belongings, looking for something. "What do you think he's searching for?" Jenny asked when I showed her the footage. "Evidence. Anything he can use against me in court, or anything that might incriminate him." I fast-forwarded through several hours of video showing Cal methodically searching my home office. He's looking for the original video files, probably, or financial records that might show how much money Mira spent on their affair. Did he find anything useful? No, because I'm not an idiot. Everything important is either in a safety deposit box or stored digitally with multiple backups. I paused the video on a clear shot of Cal rifling through my desk drawers. But he did find something he wasn't expecting. The something was a small GPS tracker that I'd hidden in my desk drawer, the kind used to monitor company vehicles. When Cal picked it up and examined it, he'd unknowingly activated it. For the past week, I'd been able to track his movements throughout the city. "Fletcher," Jenny said carefully, "please tell me you're not actually stalking him." "I'm not stalking him. I'm documenting his pattern of behavior for legal purposes." I showed her the GPS log on my phone. "Look at this. He's been to my house 6 times in the past week, always when he thinks I'm at work. He's also been to Mira's new apartment, the credit union where he banks, and somewhere called the Blue Moon Motel." Jenny raised an eyebrow. "The Blue Moon? That's not exactly a 5-star establishment." "No, it's not. It's the kind of place where people go when they don't want to be seen." I zoomed in on the GPS coordinates. He's been there 4 times this week, always for 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon. "Meeting someone?" "That's what I intend to find out." The Blue Moon Motel was exactly what you'd expect from the name, a run-down establishment on the edge of town that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions about identification. I parked across the street and waited, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. Cal's truck pulled into the parking lot at 2:17 p.m., just like the GPS tracker had predicted. He went to room 237, the same room he'd visited 3 times before. 15 minutes later, a silver sedan arrived, and I recognized the driver immediately. Lila Brennan, Mira's friend from the ad agency. So Cal hadn't just been having an affair with my wife. He'd moved on to her best friend. I took photos with my phone's camera, time-stamped and geotagged, then settled in to wait. They stayed in the room for 2 hours and 17 minutes, long enough for me to research Lila's background and discover some interesting facts. Lila Brennan was married to Robert Brennan, a successful contractor who specialized in commercial construction. They lived in a house worth twice as much as mine, drove matching BMW sedans, and had 2 children in private school. Lila's affair with Cal wasn't just adultery, it was a significant step down the social ladder. Unless, of course, there was more to it than simple attraction. Over the next few days, I expanded my investigation to include Lila's financial situation. It wasn't difficult. Public records, social media posts, and a few discreet inquiries revealed that the Brennans were living well beyond their means. Robert's construction business was struggling. They were behind on their mortgage payments, and Lila's income from the ad agency wasn't enough to maintain their lifestyle. But Lila had access to something valuable: client information from Hartwell and Associates. The ad agency handled accounts for several major local businesses, including financial institutions and retail chains. Someone with access to client data could potentially profit from insider information: advance notice of store closings, expansion plans, financial difficulties that might affect stock prices. "You think she's selling information?" Jenny asked when I outlined my theory. "I think she's desperate enough to consider it, and I think Cal is helping her figure out how to monetize what she knows. That's a serious accusation: corporate espionage, securities fraud. That's federal crime territory. Which is why I'm not making any accusations. Yet." I showed her the latest GPS tracking data. "But I am documenting patterns of behavior that might be relevant to ongoing legal proceedings." The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Cal and Lila met at the Blue Moon 3 times a week, always on days when major client information would be flowing through the ad agency. Their meetings corresponded with unusual trading activity in several local stocks, small purchases and sales that wouldn't trigger regulatory attention individually, but added up to significant profits over time. I wasn't a securities expert, but I knew enough about financial patterns to recognize something that didn't look right. And I knew enough about human nature to understand that desperate people make increasingly risky decisions when they're trying to solve their problems with shortcuts. The question was, what should I do with this information? My first instinct was to take everything to the police or the SEC and let them handle it. But that would mean revealing how I'd obtained the information, which might open me up to stalking charges or accusations of illegal surveillance. It would also mean giving up the leverage that this knowledge provided in my divorce proceedings. My second instinct was to confront Cal and Lila directly, but that seemed like a good way to get myself in serious trouble if they were as desperate as I suspected. My third instinct was to do what I did best, document everything and wait for the right moment to use it. "You're playing a dangerous game," Morrison warned me when I outlined the situation. "If these people are involved in securities fraud, they're not going to react well to being exposed. They're also not going to be in a position to file harassment charges against me or claim that I'm the real villain in this story. Fletcher, I need you to think carefully about this. Revenge is one thing, but if you're right about what they're doing, you could be putting yourself in physical danger." Physical danger. I hadn't really considered that possibility, but it made sense. People who were desperate enough to commit federal crimes might be desperate enough to do other things to protect themselves. That evening, I sat in my living room and tried to figure out what kind of man I'd become. 6 months ago, I'd been a boring suburban husband who traveled for work and trusted his wife. Now I was conducting surveillance operations, tracking people with GPS devices, and building cases for securities fraud. The transformation should have bothered me more than it did. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop following us, or you'll regret it." I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Morrison and saved a screenshot for my files. Then I checked the locks on my doors, made sure my security cameras were recording, and started planning my next move. If Cal and Lila wanted to play hardball, I was ready to show them what a really thorough accountant could do when he stopped worrying about being nice. The game was escalating, but I was no longer afraid of where it might lead. The threat message turned out to be a mistake on their part, the first in a series of increasingly desperate moves that revealed just how cornered Cal and Lila had become. My lawyer immediately filed it as evidence of harassment and intimidation, which shifted the legal narrative in my favor just as Mira's abuse allegations were starting to gain traction. "Threatening messages tend to undermine claims that you're the dangerous one," Morrison observed with satisfaction. "Judges don't like people who make threats, especially when those people are already under suspicion for other activities." The other activities had expanded beyond what I'd initially suspected. My financial analysis of the unusual trading patterns had caught the attention of someone at the SEC, not through any official complaint, but through a friend of a friend who worked in enforcement and recognized the signs of insider trading when he saw them. "They're building a case," Morrison told me during what would turn out to be our final official meeting. "Securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly conspiracy charges. Your documentation has been very helpful to their investigation." "What does that mean for my divorce case?" "It means Mira's claims about your vindictive behavior are going to sound pretty hollow when her best friend gets arrested for federal crimes. It also means her financial demands are going to be much harder to justify when the court realizes she was involved with people who were stealing from their employers and manipulating stock prices." The arrest came on a Thursday morning in early June. Cal and Lila were taken into custody simultaneously, he at his brother's house in Millfield, she at the offices of Hartwell and Associates, where FBI agents spent the day boxing up computers and client files. By noon, the story was all over local news, complete with footage of Lila being walked out of the ad agency in handcuffs. Mira called me that afternoon, her voice shaking with panic and rage. "This is your fault," she said without preamble. "You did this to them?" I documented suspicious behavior and turned it over to the appropriate authorities. What they did to themselves was commit federal crimes. Lila never hurt anyone. She was just trying to make some extra money to help with her kids' school tuition. By selling confidential client information and manipulating stock prices, that's not making extra money, Mira. That's fraud. You destroyed her life. You destroyed Cal's life. You destroyed mine. Her voice cracked, and I could hear her crying. "Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" I considered the question seriously. Was I happy? Not exactly. Satisfied, maybe. Vindicated, certainly. But happy felt like the wrong word for watching people I'd once considered friends get arrested for federal crimes. "I wanted the truth," I said finally. "I wanted people to see what really happened instead of the story you were trying to tell about me being the villain." "The truth? The truth is that you're a cold, calculating man who systematically destroyed everyone who crossed him. The truth is that I was right to look for affection somewhere else because you're incapable of normal human emotions." "The truth," I replied, "is that you had an affair, lied about it for months, tried to make me look like an abuser when you got caught, and your boyfriend turned out to be a criminal who was using you to get access to information he could sell. The truth is that I'm not the one who made bad choices here." She hung up on me. 2 days later, the local newspaper ran a front-page story about the arrest, complete with details about the insider trading scheme and the affair that had helped expose it. The reporter had done her homework, interviewing neighbors and co-workers who painted a picture of a network of lies and betrayals that went far beyond simple marital infidelity. "Local accountant's divorce uncovers securities fraud," read the headline, and for the first time in months, I was portrayed as something other than a vindictive husband. The article described me as a meticulous financial professional whose attention to detail helped expose a complex scheme that defrauded local investors. My phone started ringing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and even a few television producers who thought the story might make good material for a documentary. I declined most of the interviews, but I did agree to talk to the FBI agents who were building their case against Cal and Lila. "Your documentation was extremely thorough," Agent Sarah Martinez told me as we sat in a conference room at the federal building downtown. "The timeline you created, the financial analysis, the GPS tracking data, it's all admissible evidence that will help us prove intent and pattern of behavior. I just wanted to protect myself in my divorce case. I had no idea it would lead to federal charges. Sometimes the best investigations start with someone who pays attention to details that other people miss." Agent Martinez closed her file and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You did good work here, Mr. Grant. A lot of people could have been hurt if this scheme had continued." The divorce settlement, when it finally came through, was more favorable than I'd dared to hope. Mira's lawyer had lost most of his leverage when his client's credibility collapsed, along with her friend's freedom. The abuse allegations were quietly dropped, the spousal support demands were reduced to almost nothing, and I kept the house along with most of our shared assets. "She's moving to Phoenix," Morrison told me as we finalized the paperwork. "Starting over somewhere that doesn't know her story. Probably for the best, for both of us." Jenny's divorce was finalized the same week. Cal, facing federal charges and potential prison time, had agreed to everything she demanded just to avoid having to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. "I'm thinking about selling the house," she told me over dinner at a restaurant downtown, our first actual date, though we'd been spending time together for months. Too many memories, and frankly, too many neighbors who still look at me like I'm part of some scandal. "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere new. Somewhere I can just be Jenny the nurse instead of Jenny whose husband cheated with the neighbor." She smiled, and I was struck again by how much I'd come to care about this woman who'd started as nothing more than an ally in mutual revenge. What about you? Are you going to stay in the house? I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. The house was mine now, legally and financially, but it was also full of memories that ranged from bittersweet to toxic. Every room reminded me of some aspect of my failed marriage, and the neighborhood would probably always see me as the man who'd exposed the affair at a dinner party. I think I'm ready for a fresh start too, I said. Maybe somewhere that doesn't know my story either. We could look for fresh starts in the same place, Jenny suggested carefully, if you wanted company. I looked across the table at this woman who'd helped me find my courage, who'd stood with me when everything fell apart, who'd proven that not everyone lies when things get difficult. 6 months ago, I'd been a man who trusted too easily and paid too little attention to what was happening in his own life. Now, I was someone who asked questions, demanded honesty, and refused to accept being treated badly. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that very much. Cal and Lila both pleaded guilty to federal charges and received sentences that would keep them occupied with legal problems for years to come. Mira disappeared to Phoenix and, as far as I know, never looked back. The neighborhood gossip eventually moved on to other scandals, and the story of the dinner party that ended 2 marriages became just another piece of local folklore. Jenny and I found a house in a smaller town about an hour away, close enough to her hospital that she could keep her job, but far enough from our old neighborhood that we could build something new without constantly looking over our shoulders. It's a nice house, nothing fancy, with a big kitchen where we cook dinner together and a back deck where we drink coffee in the mornings and talk about normal things like work and weather and what to plant in the garden. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything played out, if I wish I'd handled the situation differently. The answer is complicated. I regret that my marriage ended, but I don't regret discovering that it was built on lies. I regret that other people got hurt, but I don't regret refusing to be the victim of their choices. I regret that it took a public scandal to reveal the truth, but I don't regret demanding honesty from the people in my life. Most of all, I don't regret learning that I'm not the kind of man who has to accept being betrayed quietly. I'm not the boring, forgettable guy who blends into the background anymore. I'm the guy who pays attention, who asks questions, who keeps detailed records and isn't afraid to use them when necessary. The underdog learned to bite back, and it turns out I have pretty sharp teeth when I need them. Jenny likes to say that we found each other in the wreckage of our old lives, and maybe that's true. But I think we also found ourselves, stronger, wiser, less willing to settle for relationships built on convenience instead of honesty. The ledger is closed now, all accounts settled and balanced. But I've kept my skills sharp, just in case I ever need them again. After all, you never know when someone might try to cheat an accountant, and we're very good with numbers.